Quote, Americans cannot sue prosecutors. Not when prosecutors hide evidence that could prove someone's innocence. Not when they violate the basic rules designed to make sure trials are fair. Not when those abuses put innocent people in prison, based on the Supreme Court precedent, end quote. This study done by USA Today really exemplifies my side of the resolution, that there aren't any safeguards by due process, and that we have to value the facts above due process, ultimately to reach justice. In today's last negative speech, I'm going to be going over the arguments presented by the last affirmative speaker, refute them, and then present to you four voting issues, or really reasons why you should cast a negative ballot. Moving on to her resolutional analysis, she basically said that either we're having to value the discovery fact through due process or the discovery fact alone. And I'd like to really point out this is a flawed standard. Basically, she's saying if you vote affirmative, you get due process and the discovery fact, or if you vote negative, you just get the discovery fact. What we really need is a fair standard here to say due process or the discovery fact. Or what I'm saying is that when they're both working together, which one is more valuable? And that's really what I've shown you in today's debate rounds. When due process and the discovery fact are working together, due process can become arbitrary. And also, my reason for superiority is that the discovery fact actively pursues justice, whereas due process does not. And that's really my argument in today's debate round. Moving on to her next point, she agreed that violating people's rights is not in the pursuit of justice. And this is exactly my point. If I violate what someone is due, I'm not in the pursuit of what they are due. The resolution upholds the standard of the pursuit of justice, and it applies to the discovery of facts. Moving on to her next point, she said basically, I dropped her example of the exclusionary rule and the victim of a crime. However, my response to this is that, first off, this debate round isn't really about examples, it's about the principles that we're looking at. But I did kind of refute her examples, basically saying that both these examples, the discovery of facts, or whatever the mechanism was, violated the pursuit of justice. They don't fall under the resolution. This is exactly my point, and the affirmative even pointed this out in her own refutation. Her last point was refuting my example. She said, well, the judge threw out the evidence, he wasn't in the pursuit of justice. And this is exactly the point. The judge threw out the facts, and he wasn't in the pursuit of justice. This really shows the superiority of the discovery of facts, is that when we include the facts and value the facts higher, we maximize the pursuit of justice. And that's exactly what I'm saying to you, and really exemplifying throughout my case in today's debate round. So let's go on to my first voting issue. My first voting issue is that due process does not uphold justice. Due process does not uphold justice. Now, going back to my refutation, really my point that due process is arbitrary, she said that, well, the judge threw out the facts, that's not in the pursuit of justice. What I was saying the pursuit of justice is what people are due. Are people due the facts being held to the trial? That's not an inherent human right. And so the judge throwing the facts, he's still pursuing justice because he didn't violate anyone's rights. Ultimately, had we valued the facts above an arbitrary judicial system, justice would have been achieved. But because of this voting issue, due process is unjust, we ultimately see injustice comes about. My second point under that due process is unjust or doesn't uphold justice fully is because it doesn't actively pursue justice. She never really refuted my contention at all, is that due process sits on the sideline and says, well, the discovery of facts can act. It allows the discovery of facts to act, both in the example of preventing crime and reversing mistakes. Due process is not actively pursuing justice, and that is why it's inferior to the discovery of fact. And that leads into my second voting issue, that the discovery of fact upholds justice. The discovery of fact upholds justice, and there's two main reasons for this. One of them was unrefuted by the affirmative, that facts determine what someone is due. It's not the amount of process that says, well, this person is guilty, this person is innocent. The facts determine what justice is to be. And I say that since I have no further speeches in today's debate rounds, I ask you to flow this negative because I can't respond to any new arguments brought up by the affirmative in her last speech. My second reason that the discovery fact upholds justice is because it maximizes the pursuit of justice. The discovery fact actively pursues justice to try and stop crime before it happens and acts as a check on due process that says, well, when due process messes up, we'll fix the mistake and ultimately render justice. In the opening example I presented, yes, due process and the discovery fact work together, but it was the discovery fact that was pursuing justice, and it was due process that stood on the sidelines and said, well, you can act, discover the fact. Which one is more valuable? The discovery fact which stopped an injustice, or if we had valued due process above the discovery fact, would we still have the injustice? Yes. The discovery fact prevents injustice before it happens. Those are really my two reasons for superiority. Moving on to my third voting issue. My third voting issue is tagged as explanation. And I'd like to really point these two, really explain these 2 points because they're very important. My first explanation is the pursuit of justice. Again, if I violate what someone is due, I'm not in the pursuit of what they are due. Ultimately, any example or application presented by the affirmative that says the discovery fact violates people's rights does not fall under the resolution. My second thing I'd like to explain is that allowing versus pursuing. Due process allows the discovery fact to act, but the discovery fact actively pursues justice, and that is my reason for superiority, and I hope you can agree with me that's ultimately why we have justice. My fourth voting issue is I ask you to vote on what matters. I ask you not to vote on examples or applications. I ask you to vote on the principles in today's debate. The principles that the discovery of fact ultimately renders justice. That the principle that due process is arbitrary when it is in conflict with the discovery of fact. And the principle that there cannot be an unfair standard. You can't have the due process and the discovery of fact. They have to be on an equal playing field. Thank you so much for your time.